turn the countdown on. It's a 60-second countdown.
Okay.
And when it's down, we're up.
Okay, great.
Our mic's alive too, so we can't say anything. But have you caught up with the news over there that our monarch is apparently gravely ill? And
I saw.
yeah,
I saw. Yeah.
Pretty good run. 70 years on the throne.
You know, you can't argue with that. I mean, wow, what a figure in history, you know?
What is it? 96, I think. So,
96, I saw. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been listening to the BBC.
As we all do.
Right.
BBC overnight, I get the
Yeah.
news here. So, all right. Do. It's the bird emergency. I'm Grant Williams. I am a bird nerd, and it's a great delight to be joined by another bird nerd. Can you believe that? And a fellow podcaster, Aaric Eisenstein. I was always going to muck that up. I've been telling myself, don't say Einstein. Don't say Einstein.
Yeah, as you get to know me, you'll stop saying Einstein. I promise.
And Aaric's got a podcast called The Avian Rebbe, and also it's a multimedia enterprise you got there. A store, a book. Actually, let me get that up. Let's just get that out of the way. Where?
All right.
Oh no, it's not there. It's not there. Well, we're what have I done? Well, I'll get that up. How slapdash is this? If you're joining us live or nearly live, it's the middle of the night here, or it's early in the morning, so that we're fitting in with the time frames across the world. Oh, and I should note too, JJ Harrison took the photo behind me of the critically endangered swift parrot. Thank you, Wikimedia Commons, for allowing me to have access to that beautiful shot. Nectar feeding parrot and a migratory parrot. Do you know about the swift parrot, Aaric?
I don't. That's the first one I think I've ever seen.
They breed in Tasmania, and then they migrate across Bass Strait onto the mainland, and they follow the flowering eucalypt season, and they're a nectar feeder, but they are not a true lorikeet, and they're called the swift parrot because they're really, 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 really fast when they're flying. So
beautiful.
Yeah. So tell us how you got into birds, because you have a very different slant on the love of birds than I do, and yeah, just for it. And I'll bring up your book in just a second. So.
Okay. So this all started with for me right around the onset of COVID. I was pretty much aware that COVID was going to force us to be alone and outside, and I decided that I wanted to buy a camera. I had never owned a camera before, never a grown-up camera. And one of my friends decided to get me a camera hooked up. And so I went to the camera store with him. And right before everything shut down, all the stores, I bought a camera. And I started going to the parks every single morning, walking, patrolling, haunting, trying to find a place psychologically as well as physically that was safe, that was stable, and that was unaffected by COVID. And so I took my camera, I started walking through the parks, and I started teaching myself how to take photos of birds. And I took some really awful photos, but they were the very first that I'd ever taken. And I put them up on Facebook with a little bit of dark humor. And really used it as a way to provide therapy to myself, and as it turned out, to a few other folks as well. And it started to resonate a little bit. People kind of liked it. And then I got a call from my rabbi who said, Aaric, would you do something for me? And I said, yes. What would you like me to do? And he said, I'd like you to start teaching each Friday night in our, at that time, Zoom service about what you're doing on Facebook. And I said, really? That's really quite an honor, and I would happily do so. And so, in the last now going on about 97 weeks, every week I take 2 photos, and you can see them on the screen here, and I write 2 short teachings. They're called drashot, which is a short teaching inspired by the divine that I see in nature, the beauty of the birds, a little bit of Jewish wisdom or spirituality, and then relate that to where we are in the world today, and how the beauty of birds can provide us strength and uplift, joy and inspiration. What started as a pushback against COVID has evolved evolved into an ongoing study of the world's beauty and what birds can contribute and inspire. So that's what I do.
Tell me, I'm interested in the camera setup that you settled on, because it sort of wasn't your choice, was it? Somebody was advising you and said, here's a good camera,
Yeah,
go for it. So
yeah.
what did you end up with?
So I use a Panasonic Lumix G9, which is a micro four thirds machine with the Panasonic Leica 100 to 400 lens. I guess it's probably the best telephoto lens that's available for that camera. And it's a little bit different. I mean, there are other cameras that have larger sensors or faster lenses, certainly bigger lenses. But what I've got works very nicely for me. The photos, I don't get all the same photos that some people will get, but the photos that I do get, I'm quite pleased with. And it's a light system, which if you're walking around out in the park for 4 or 5 hours is nice. It's not terribly expensive as compared to some others. And it's small enough that I can put it in a little backpack and take it on the plane. So that's pretty great. So it's a workable system for me. And all of the photos that you see here on my website at avianrebi.com, all of the photos were taken with this system. So it works.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you're aware that I do an occasional sort of spin-off series called Photography Friday with an F, where I talk with people who are much better photographers than me, and I'm going through my purchase journey at the moment, and I'm pretty settled on joining the Panasonic Lumix tribe. But I'm probably going to go for a one of the secondhand video and stills cameras, just because I want to be doing video production as much as taking stills. But yeah, I'm sold on the micro four thirds, just from the weight and the size point of view for traveling, for getting around.
Yeah, there's one of your countrymen, Andrew Goodall, has a beautiful site called Nature's Image Photography.
Nature's Image. I'm hoping to speak with Andrew.
Andrew's good people.
Yeah, he's on my list to get in onto Photography Friday. But of course, Andrew runs a tour and workshop business alongside his portrait photography and whatnot that he does, and I think he's going to be away for quite some time, because of course everyone who does tours hasn't been able to go anywhere for so long.
Exactly.
Now,
Yeah, it was
Eric, let me just say, I just saw. I was giving side eye. I just saw someone liked uh, a post on Twitter, and it was someone who shouldn't be up at this time. So I'm wondering if Linda is is watching. If you are, Linda, just say something or give us a thumbs up in the comments. And I would just have to say, what the hell are you doing up at the moment? But it just seemed weird that someone came in just after Linda liked Linda liked the notice that we were going to
very
be
nice.
live on Twitter.
Hi, Linda.
That would freak me out. If
Yeah.
and if it isn't, welcome. Hello Facebook. Hello YouTube. Nice of you to be with us. If you do have a question or a thought, and you're watching, pop it in the comments, and I will. We'll react to it. We'll do that. Um, One of the things I was really interested to speak to you about, Eric, because it's quite different to my personal experience with life, is the spiritual fulfillment, or maybe reinforcement is perhaps the right word, that you experience being in nature and watching birds, and how that is an essential part of your life now.
Mhm.
Um, and I only say now because I'm
Right.
gathering that your really quite intimate relationship with birds is a new one.
That's right.
Can you fill us in on how your spirituality, and actually let's explain what a Rebbe is,
Okay.
as part of this part of the discussion. But
Sure.
yeah, how have how has your relationship with birds um, impacted on your spirituality,
Mhm.
and vice versa? Let's.
Yeah. I mean, the fundamental premise of my spiritual outlook is that, and you can call it religion, you can call it spirituality. Within the confines of religion, I'm Jewish, but it could be Christianity, it could be Islam, it could be, whatever perspective a person holds. Um, that that spiritual encounter or religious encounter, or shall we just say the encounter with the divine, is not limited only to a church or a synagogue, and it's not limited to only a Sunday or a Saturday. That there is the presence of the divine in every aspect and presence in every place that we go, and in all the times that we experience. And so that to me is really kind of the fundamental premise that, as we go out in a park, as we go to a seashore, as we go to the top of a mountain, we can encounter the divine. And as I go to these different places, uh, they're very, very different, and they have very different impacts on the way that I think. So, for example, I've just finished my second book, which is going to be available the end of October, and the subtitle of it is Left Texas, the western half of the state of Texas. That's the first book, and this one is about Central Texas and the birds and the environment and the kind of perspective that comes from being in the hills and the dryness of Central Texas. And certain birds and certain environments lead to certain thoughts. And so, when you go out to the desert, uh, you have a different experience than when you're on top of a mountain, than when you are next to a running river, when you are down in the scrub brush of South Texas. And so all of those different places inspire different thoughts. And one of the things that, at least for me, is so beautiful about birding is, by definition, you're going to be quiet, and you're going to be, in the way that I do it, moving, hiking, trekking. You're going to be alone. And just having that environment provides a context for thinking in different ways. For 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday or Sunday morning, nothing is beeping at me. Nobody is calling. Nothing is ringing. And I'm able to just spend the time alone with my thoughts, looking at the world in a slightly different way. And when I see a bird like this little gray catbird, you know, it's fascinating. I mean, if you look at parts of it, they're very dark. If you look at the eye, it's jet black except for the light that's reflected back, and the exposure is such that the little red feathers there at the vent are able to pop out. Those are the kinds of things that make me look at the world in a different way. And that to me is what spirituality is. It's primarily about appreciation. It is about awareness. It is about conscious, intentional looking, and having the time to think. And birding has given me all of that. And it's, as you say, it is relatively new, just in the last couple of years, but it has been extremely influential in shaping my life. So let me use that as a way to tell you what a Rebbe is. When I started doing this, as I said, my rabbi was the one who invited me to teach, and we kind of jokingly, sort of tongue in cheek, said, "Okay, well, I'm going to be the avian Rebbe," because a Rebbe in Jewish tradition oftentimes is an ordained rabbi, but doesn't have to be. Rabbi is an official, if you will, cleric who has ordination, which I do not. But a Rebbe, more than just being, shall we say, a rabbi in that context, is a community leader, a teacher, and a storyteller, amongst other things. And as I say, it started out kind of tongue in cheek. I was, there are no other avian Rebbes. And I took the title kind of self-deprecatingly, but it's really developed into something where now, thousands of people each week see the work that I do. And some of the notes that I get and the words that people share tell me that it's really making a difference in their lives. And if I can do that, then yeah, I've earned the title of Rebbe. And it is growing and evolving, becoming deeper for me. And I see the photos and the text together as offerings for God and community. And that's what I hope to share with people.
I'm really interested in how you saw birds and nature before you started looking at them through the magnified lens of your camera. It was walking in a forest or in the bush, as we say here,
Right.
A completely different experience for you before you had the camera? Like, were birds just little brown or colourful things in the background
Yeah,
beforehand?
completely. I knew the handful of common backyard birds, of course, in my local area, but I knew nothing of birds. I had never studied them. I was unaware of so many of them. I had no idea that where I live in Central Texas is, it's on the north-south
It's on the
migratory
flyway.
flyway.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that we sat on the kind of the dividing line between Western North America and Eastern North America. Had no idea of any of this. And, you know, it was funny when I first started getting into it. In fact, I wrote a piece about it. There's a bird here called a crested caracara. It's a big bird. It's the size, oh, I'd say almost the size of a vulture. I mean, it's a
Yeah, it is a vulture, isn't it? I think.
I think it's actually a falcon,
Oh,
um,
okay, righto.
but
Yeah,
it's comparable.
but
Um,
it
and
it's a
and
big dumpy looking falcon though.
it's
Yeah,
big.
so
It's
yeah,
big.
it but
Yeah.
it has that sort of slumped when it's resting. It's not tidy like a
Yeah. All
falcon.
right.
It's sort of it's like some of the big. Well, we've got one here, the whistling kite, that it always looks like it's kind of just got up. You know, it's
Uh-huh.
just got out. A bit like me at the moment. It
Very nice.
always,
Very
whereas
nice.
you know, you look at a peregrine falcon and
Right.
they are dapper, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And for instance, our goshawks are snappy. You know, they're
Mhm.
snappy dresses.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I think the caracara is very much a. All right. Do I
All
have to
right.
come, Mum? All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'll do my hair.
I
You
was
know.
gonna say needs a shower and a
Yeah.
shave. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a but you know, it's a big bird and they're fairly prominent and they're relatively common around here now, more so than they used to be. And when I saw photos that folks had posted saying, you know, I saw one here and so I was astounded. I said, "My God, I've lived here my whole life and I've never seen this bird. How can it be?" You know, they're making it up. That can't really be a real bird. And sure enough, it is. And you know, same thing with a painted bunting, a bird that I had never seen before, and now I see you know every summer. And you don't have to go to some you know incredibly exotic location. I mean, you may not see it in your own backyard, but you might, and you'll certainly see it at a park with any open space. They're common, but I was completely oblivious. Had no idea that all of this was going on around me. And I think you know your question is a very insightful one, which is um, when do we start to see things? When we start to look for them, and you know there's a lot there that I think also has a spiritual analog. That there are things around us all the time that we simply fail to notice.
What got me thinking about your sort of awakening, and that's sort of the really interesting uh, thing about um, your relationship with birds, was that it sort of happened,
Right.
and because my connection with birds started so young,
Mm.
I can't imagine a time where I wasn't fascinated by
Ah,
birds. I just can't think back to a time where I just went, oh, gee, birds are cool. I mean,
right.
I've recounted many times. I was that kid lying on the floor of the lounge room, after dinner with a sketchbook, you know,
Wow.
drawing birds and imagining all the birds I would one day see, and
Nice.
you know, but I, I'm also interested in that spiritual connection, Eric. That it has it only been birds? Like, if you're in a forest, if you were in a forest beforehand, like 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, did you not? I mean, had you ever been to the redwoods in California
I have.
and looked up? I mean, I haven't been to the redwoods, but we've got the mountain ash forests here. Uh, you know, the tallest trees on earth. You go to a forest here and you look up, and you cannot not appreciate the
Right.
majesty
Right.
of a healthy forest ecosystem.
Right.
So how how was that? I mean, did you experience that feeling earlier, and how was that divorced from birds and other, you know, wildlife?
Yeah. I mean, the answer to your question is yes. I've been to uh, some very, very majestic places and seen some very, very beautiful animals on land, and the ocean as well, snorkeling and seeing fish. Um, and and you're right. There is a beauty and a majesty there that is inspiring, um, but it hasn't resonated with me in the same way that birds do. And I don't know if that's a function of flight, of color, of song, of variety, of proximity. Um, there's something about. I mean, if you look historically, you think about ancient China, and what is the symbol of majesty and miracles and wonder in ancient China? It's the dragon, a serpent with wings. If you go back to the ark that held the Ten Commandments, what is on the cover of the ark? Two angels, little children or cherubs with wings. The Aztecs have wings in their sacred animals. The story of Icarus is the story of flight. There's something about flight that I think resonates in a very deep place across time and space with all of us. And even when you ask people today, what superpower would you like? I can wave a magic wand, and what superpower? 95% of people say, I want to be able to fly. There is something about birds that is special and different in a way that, for me, flowers, butterflies, insects uh, don't have that same resonance. Um,
I-
and
Is there?
and
Sorry, no,
no,
go
I
on
was
with
just
that
going to
thought.
say, but it is important to me. I mean, when I teach, one of the again, coming back to this kind of universality, for me, it's birds. If you were to find the divine in trees or in flowers or in insects or what have you, that's great. By all means, I don't think that there is anything necessarily exclusionary about birds in the sense that only birds are able to provide this kind of insight or guidance. Um, that's the channel that I follow, and if there are other ways to get there, then I'm all for it.
Based on what you just said, I'm really interested if your spirituality, your your personal religious experience has deepened or improved or increased um, based on the discovery of birds. Like has divinity or devoutness, for want of a better term, um, become greater for you because of your new relationship with birds?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, and the answer is an overwhelming yes. Um, I I had been a, let's say, less aware person for a very long time, and my religious observance was tied to holidays. It was tied to particular meals. It was tied to being at the synagogue or life cycle events. Those kinds of things. The kinds of things that are important. They're important punctuation marks, but they're limited. Um,
And and can I maybe make an assumption that does that mean that your religious observance was habitual and society driven in earlier in that you were doing what you do, you know?
yeah, there's certainly an element of that. Yes, I mean, no question, no question. It was by way of contrast. Now, on a daily basis, on a continuous basis, through the course of the day, the awareness of the divine infuses my day. And if I see a bird at the feeder on my deck, or if I see a bird flying across the sky while I'm filling up my car with gas, or I'm out actively looking to receive photos in the park. Um, all of that is a constant reminder. There is a tradition in Jewish life that says that you should say 100 blessings each day. And you can easily make the argument that okay, God wants us to give to the deity 100 blessings, and it is for God's benefit. I would suggest it's exactly the opposite. That the value of that regimen, if you will, is actually for the people saying the blessings. That by saying 100 blessings during the course of the day, it forces you to be aware of, I woke up today. That's pretty good. I had a meal today. That's pretty good. I saw a sunrise. I saw a sunset. I saw a beautiful mountain. I saw a special bird. All of these gratitude practices that we do during the course of the day make our day richer, more meaningful, more invigorating. It has improved my relationships with people. I am, as a result of doing much of the thinking and writing, I am more in harmony with other people. I am gentler towards myself and others. This this kind of awareness that has come from, I won't say bird watching, but watching birds, has really deepened and improved my daily life in fundamental ways. Yes.
Do you think that this awakening? I hate using these grandiose terms
No,
and
it's not a
whatnot,
bad term.
but I think when you are equating it on a personal level, because everyone exists in their own head.
Sure.
But do you think this awakening would have happened if we didn't have the pandemic and the lockdown? Like, do you think this love of birds, and I want to extend that to the
Yeah.
to the natural world a little bit further,
Right.
because
Right.
even if we choose to focus on birds, I don't think any of us can be. Well, actually, maybe some of us can. Some twitchers, I think, fail to see anything other than the bird that they're checking off in front of them. But do you think that this awakening was ready to occur, and that may have occurred anyway if the pandemic and the isolation wasn't an accompanying condition?
No, I don't. I'd like to think it would have, and I don't believe it would have. I think that the impetus to move in this direction was COVID, and I hate to say anything good about a global pandemic that killed millions of people. And for me, that was what set it all off. As I say, my awakening, my slowing down and noticing what was around me, because remember how slow things were, is a direct result of what came out of COVID. And when I was writing and taking photos at the outset, particularly in the very darkest days of the pandemic, when we were still locked down and before vaccines, and when death rates were daily news, this was a desperate, visceral reaction, trying to find some kind of light to share with people, and that sense of intensity certainly would not have occurred otherwise. This was reactive. This was my pushback, and a quest to find something that was still the way it ought to be. I mean, to go to the park in the morning and watch the sunrise and listen to the birds wake up and sing and then start to feed, that was stability. The birds didn't know that there was a pandemic, and the sun still rose.
I,
And
I reckon the birds knew well and
yeah,
truly that we weren't getting in their way as
maybe
much
so.
as we used
Maybe
to.
so. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe so. But I mean, it was the kind of thing that helped me to contextualize the horror, where in historical terms, epochal terms, COVID is going to end up being a blip. 1,000 years from now, we probably won't talk about COVID. Um, we talk about the Black Death. We talk about some of the other catastrophes of human history that we're aware of. Um, Maybe COVID will register, maybe it won't. For those of us who lived through it, and more to the point, for those of us who lost people in it, we'll certainly uh, talk about it. But in the natural scale, the sunshine, the bird song, it doesn't register. And to be able to hold on faithfully to those things that didn't change was incredibly important to me. That was that was a rock. That was a place, and I needed that at the time. And as it turns out, so did quite a few other people. And that's what I hope to be able to offer.
Yeah, I share your unwillingness to be grateful for a global pandemic,
Of
and
course.
let's also note that it is not over.
Yeah.
I think there were nearly 500 people died in the US yesterday. I think that's
Wow.
trending down, but it's still happening.
Sure.
We're losing. I still think about 100 a day here in Australia, which means we're punching above our weight. You guys have
Right.
what 340 million, and we're
Right.
we're nowhere near it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's so it's not over, even though we've all moved past it, whatever that means. But if you can take a silver lining out of any black cloud, is that more people have found birds and bird watching, and their local parks, their local
Right.
patch, and
Right.
become familiar with it, and perhaps value it more than they did prior. So if that sense of community and connectedness to the natural things that are still around in their neighbourhood, if that's become something that is common, and I don't know if it's only in privileged Western societies or if it's worldwide. I hope it has been greater than that. But that's one thing we can
Yeah.
be thankful for, even though we're still knocking down the habitat of this little fella. Where are we? This little fella,
Yeah.
the swift
Right.
parrot, as
Right.
um, I don't know if we're awakened enough en masse
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, it's a very good point. I mean, one of the things that was interesting is of course, there were massive internal migration patterns here in the U.S. is where I'm obviously most familiar, and people moved out of kind of more urban areas to either suburban or exurban areas, because if you're going to, it's great to be in the penthouse of a condo tower, but the penthouse is 1,000 square feet, and you can live in a suburban house that's 4,000 square feet and has a backyard for the same price. What do you do when there's a respiratory plague? You need a little space, and people started moving to places and starting moving out of cities and into more rural areas, um, precisely because I want to hike, I want to kayak, I want to raft or bike or what have you. And I hope, and it's a hope at this point, that we will come to appreciate the value of that open space and the animals and plants and what have you that live in it, um, in anticipation of what will be, either COVID part two or whatever the
The
next
next one.
plague is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can,
because
can I clarify what you meant there, and if it was a personal situation? Like when you said move to somewhere else, do you mean people actually um, picked up sticks and moved, like transplanted their life,
sold their
or
home here, bought a
yeah,
home there. Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah. Huge numbers of them in the US. Huge.
See, our experience of COVID, certainly where I live, um, we are we here in Melbourne were either the most or the second most locked down
Right.
city in the world,
Right. Right. Right.
um,
Right.
depending on how you do it. But right from really early on, uh, I wasn't allowed to on our 2 hours that we were allowed for exercise. I wasn't allowed to go more than 5 kilometres from
Yeah.
home, and
Yeah.
my chosen supermarket was 6 kilometres away.
Of course it
Right,
was. Yeah.
um, so we had that situation where we people who had bought homes and were wanting to relocate prior to the lockdowns, they weren't allowed to. They,
Oh,
they, you, if you had
interesting.
a holiday home
Yeah. Yeah.
for this first period, you couldn't go there, right?
Oh, wow.
Then it kind of got, when when some people in government found they couldn't go to their holiday
Right.
homes,
Yeah.
of
Well,
course they changed
yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
rules a little bit. They
Yeah.
made it a bit grey.
Yeah.
Um, but I live across the road from a park,
Mm.
and so I could go over and spend my hour or two
Yeah.
hours in the park.
Yeah.
Uh, and I sort of did that anyway, but I did notice that more and more people were coming to the park. So I started feeding the cockatoos and the corellas.
Hmm.
Um, and then I watched my neighbours enjoy birds
Right.
because they had never seen them. And all of a sudden there's 50, 60 squawking white
Right. Right.
and,
Right.
and pink and grey birds. Uh, and we're lucky with the plantings are all native and a
Mm.
lot of eucalypts. So we've got lots of honey eaters, wattlebirds
Hmm.
and things here, and a resident pair of magpies. Australian magpies is quite
Uh-huh.
distinct from your magpies. Our magpies are basically black and white crows
Okay.
um, that don't behave like crows, um, but they are corvids. Uh, so I did always see a silver lining about
Yeah.
the situation that we were in. As the daily death counts and press conferences
Right.
were being held and all that kind of stuff. It was really nice just to be able to see the cockatoos and corellas being cockatoos and corellas.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Having, a little bit of distraction therapy, if nothing else, being able to just focus on anything other than the horror was valuable. And to then be able to extrapolate that and say, we're going to get past this at some point, and at some cost. But it ultimately, I was convinced would be something that receded, and and being able to maintain at least a little bit of optimism that there was a light coming, was very important. Very important.
I really appreciated the sense of normalcy that life goes on that I
Exactly.
was getting from watching the birds, and
That's
especially
right.
it was so long. I was able to watch, two broods of new birds
Yeah.
come along. The new,
Yeah.
the squawk. There's nothing like a squawking cockatoo chick. They sound horrible, but yeah, begging for food.
Mm.
It was really good. I guess you guys have a different experience, as you mentioned. You're on the north south flyway in the States,
Right.
and you're also in that area where birds move seasonally, also east to west a little bit, and altitudinally as well. So you don't only have the long migrants, you have the seasonal migrants shuffling around. Um, we don't have that pronounced migration here in Australia. We have, seasonal visitors and whatnot. As a rule, I mean, there are some places that are different, but anybody who's on the flyway with you has the opportunity to see, hundreds and hundreds of species
Oh yeah.
each year if they're looking.
Yeah.
And if they're feeding,
Right.
that they can pop into their backyard. So you mentioned you've got the feeder out. What are some of the really notable things that you have experienced in your backyard?
Well, so right now it's hummingbird season, which I just, like anybody, I marvel at them. So they're beautiful. And right now we're just starting to get, this is the official start of peak migration season for the fall. So I saw Baltimore Orioles the other day in my backyard, and it's a beautiful bird that until a year ago I had never seen before. They're around. Um, I saw an indigo bunting just a few weeks ago for the first time in my backyard. That was incredible. I put in some native habitat and a water feature, and I ended up with a collection of cedar waxwings that are just spectacular. And they were gathered around the water, and they're exploding in motion and light, color, and the water is spraying everywhere, and the light hit it all just right. Um, and so I've gotten some really beautiful photos just in the backyard. Um, the flip side, again, it's the natural world. So all of these um, dove and siskins and warblers that I'm seeing in the backyard also mean that I have hawks. So I get Cooper's hawks and broad-winged hawks who like to take up a kind of an oversight position above that water feature, waiting for an unsuspecting bird to be too involved in its bath. And I've seen some interesting, shall we say, interactions between the birds in my backyard.
Oh,
Um, it's real. It's beautiful, and it's awful. AWE. It is full of awe. It is real, and that's important to recognize that not everything is Hollywood. Um, a bird that I like to watch is also the meal for another bird that I like to watch, and it's a powerful statement about the reality of the world in which we live. That is nature.
let me put my horticulture hat on because I'm a horticulturist by training,
Okay.
Eric. So how much how much thought or planning did you put into uh, the term I picked up on was creating some native habitat? Um, how and how difficult is it to get sort of really good, specific local advice over
Yeah.
there for trying to rebuild some
Right.
a resting stop
Right.
because
Right.
that's what's important
That's right.
in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. So it actually was surprisingly easy. There were the primary resource that we have is the Audubon Society, which is the largest bird focused conservation group in North America. And Audubon publishes on their website a recommended list. You can put in your postal code, so a very specific small geographic area. I mean, not even an entire city, but just a very small piece of a city. And it'll say, okay, here are the plants that are well adapted to your soil conditions, to your climate, to your water conditions, and will work for the birds in this area. And in fact, if you plant this, you'll attract these. A trumpet vine attracts hummingbirds. Something that puts out seeds will attract something else. So I started with the Audubon list, and then I hired a garden designer who is aware of these things and focused on them, and put together a plan. And my area is not very large. I mean, it's only a few square yards, but I got a nice mix of plants, and it's beautiful, and it is a variety of. It provides habitat, it provides shelter, it provides food, and then I also put in the water feature, and I get some really, really special experiences by being able to watch the birds out there. And it wasn't cheap, but it wasn't tens of thousands of dollars either. And I feel really good about the investment that I've made, not just in the habitat, but in my own personal benefit. I get a show in my backyard every day. That's pretty
Forgive
nice.
forgive me for looking off to the side, but of course I googled trumpet vine to see
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which one you were referring to. Have you got the red one or the orange one?
I think they recommended both actually for this area.
Okay, because I've
So
got I've got one which is a Pyrostega, which I knew, and another one called Campsis, which is also called the trumpet creeper.
okay,
Um, quite. Let me put the flower up, and we'll see whether it's the one. Oh, there we go. There's the photo. Let me pop this up, and you can tell me if
okay,
is
yeah,
is that's the
yeah,
one. Okay,
yeah,
all
and you
right.
can
So
see. I mean, you can almost see.
Campsis
You know,
Campsis radicans.
yeah.
There we
I
are.
mean, squint just a little bit, and you can see the hummingbird.
Yeah,
Sticking its
yeah,
beak into that flower.
yeah,
They're perfectly made for each other. So
yeah.
it's
And
nice.
um, now before you rushing out to find it in Australia because it's so beautiful, can be it's one of the big Noniaceae climbers, which is like the uh, Tecumseh whatnot. It can be invasive over here,
Mm,
so please don't go out and get it. But you can get other big Noniaceae, big
go
nonias.
local.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we've got. We may have a tropical one from far north Queensland, but no, certainly not any local ones in Melbourne. But the Pandaria will do the job just fine here in Australia, or
Good.
in Eastern Australia anyway. I, I'm wondering, um, Eric, with the let's go back to the awakening and the awareness
Mhm.
of the birds around you. Um, what what made you want to write and and share your experience? What like have you got is there a local synagogue that you started talking with, or were you like me, annoying all your friends and family all the time, talking about the amazing bird
Yeah.
that you just saw, and they're going, "What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?"
I a little of both. So I started annoying people on Facebook. That and when I say writing, I would maybe write literally 2 or 3 sentences. I mean, these were not well fleshed out, in-depth treatments of anything.
But they are
Uh,
well constructed. That's what I
yeah,
want
they
to
were
point
very
out.
pithy,
Yeah,
and so 2 or 3 brilliant sentences that got people thinking a little bit, and maybe it was a little bit of a chuckle because we needed a chuckle. And then when I started speaking, delivering basically a small sermon is the way to think about it. Not preachy, but more just really more of a lesson. In other words, I have seen this bird, and it made me think of this from our tradition. And I hope that in this way, it would help us deal with what we're facing today. That's kind of the model of my writing.
So
And now,
sorry,
no,
I just want to extend that point because it comes back to this sense of awakening and awareness beforehand. When, when I'm guessing that the points that you're trying to reinforce when you're speaking to people and using birds as an example or as a reinforcement, um, were those principles as evident to you prior to the pandemic and prior to your relationship with birds?
no, because the essence of what I do is drawing a connection between two seemingly disparate things. That's the key. Is so for example, the photo that you showed on the cover of my book is a northern mockingbird that is about to or trying to drive an American kestrel off a perch. That's a single photo. The birds. It's not a photo of two birds that were juxtaposed. It was a single photo, and and so when I took that photo, and I explained in the let's call it the first paragraph of what I wrote, that what allows you to see this photo is that you have to slow it down. In other words, when I was live in the park, I couldn't actually see that image. Instead, the photo I think was taken at 1/1000th of a second, and it's freezing the action in that split instant of time that allows you to see, wow, that looks really amazing the way that mockingbird is coming in with its wings spread and so on. Slowing down, stopping time. Shabbat, the Sabbath, whether it's on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, is a period for stopping time. That's what we do. And it's baked into the structure of the universe as the universe was created. And that's what we're supposed to do, stop. And when you stop, then you can see the appreciation, the savoring, the cherishing, the other wonderful things that are in the universe that during the 6 secular days we miss because we're going, going, going. We have this happening, we have that happening. There's tumult all around us. It's too much, it's overwhelming. It's only when you stop that you're able to see what really matters. And putting those two together, being able to see that the photographic process allows us to see the beauty of those two birds is analogous to what's happening with Shabbat. That's the lesson that I drew, the connection that I drew, that I wouldn't have done otherwise. It would have never occurred to me because I wasn't doing photography and I wasn't looking at birds. That's
And
the learning.
and so you've led me beautifully to where I wanted to go
Ah,
next, and I haven't
good.
had to find a way to jam it into the conversation. That's why I started doing the Photography Friday um, sessions because um, the sharing of bird photographs now that the technology and the techniques are available to people in a way like it they never have been before.
Yeah.
Even with a good mobile
Right.
phone, you
Right.
can do. You can't do it with my old clunker, but with some of the new ones, you
Yeah.
can still do some of the motion capture stuff that we're just talking about, and that allows us to appreciate what birds do, but it also allows us to more easily share
Right.
our own experiences and the really amazing and unique things about birds. And let's be clear, also insects or whatever else that
Sure.
people choose to choose to do. Um, I'm I'm sort of curious uh, how the appreciation of birds through photography, thanks to your friend who set you up
Yeah.
with a Lumix G9. Uh, I'm wondering how that then led you to the podcast.
Yeah. So, I started, well, as I say, I started very small. One photo with two or three sentences on Facebook. And, and Facebook is wonderful and has its place. But I wanted to be able to offer a more comprehensive presentation of the work that I do. So I started a website. And now all of my photos and all of my writing are posted on the website at avianrebi.com. Then I thought, well, an email list would be a nice thing to develop. And so I started sending out a newsletter once a week, because that's another mechanism that people like to be able to consume information. So that goes out. Then somebody said, well, what I'm really enjoying is when you speak, you give a little bit of the background and the context. Where was this photo taken? What were you thinking about at the time? Why did you go to this place as opposed to that place? What's the backstory? So the podcast is the backstory, and it's usually just 5 or 6 minutes, but I give a little bit of the backstory of a particular photo and teaching, and then I read it, I narrate it, and so that's another mechanism that people seem to like. And the fun thing now is I have this library of those, and in my second book, again, a COVID thing. We all learned about QR codes in COVID. Yeah, these were some of the potential covers.
So,
The top
which
left
one
one,
won?
a variant of the top left one is going to be the second book. Um, and in the second book, every page will have a QR code that links back to the podcast for that specific bird and teaching. So people will be able to get the backstory and hear my dulcet tones in addition to simply reading the book. So it's fun to tie all these different media together and really to meet people where they are. Some people enjoy reading, others enjoy uh, an email. Um, there's something about a paper book though that people still really love, and it's been a very gratifying experience putting that together. Mostly when people say, "I'm buying 10 of these because I want to give them as gifts to people," and knowing that not that you bought my book, but that you liked it enough to give to 10 other people, that's really heartwarming.
Yeah, that is um, it's gratifying. I don't like to use the word so much, but I love it when people tell me that they not only like my show, but that they are sharing it and telling other people
Absolutely.
to listen. Um, it's it's nice to think that anyone actually gives a shit about anything that I say, you know. But yeah, it is nice. Um, Foreword by Joe Smith. Tell me who Joe Smith is.
Sorry, that's a placeholder. The forward is actually, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Those were placeholders. So the forward was actually written by Michael Barnes, and Michael is one of the deans of the Austin journalism scene for 30 years. He writes about Austin. He also happens to be a birder, and Michael reached out to me, back in February, I guess, and said, "Eric, has the local newspaper is the American Statesman." He says, "Has the local Austin, the Austin American Statesman told the story of the avian Rebbe?" And I said, "Not yet." And he said, "Beautiful. I'd love to write a profile." So, again, wow. So Michael wrote this lovely profile, which was 5 or 6 pages in the newspaper, color photos. They did a video. It was quite flattering. And so I am running that with his permission as the forward to this second book, to provide a little bit of context and background, almost a transition between volume 1 and volume 2. So it's really quite nice. So it's Michael Barnes. It's not Joe Smith.
Uh,
Yeah.
it- I would have been tempted to have something like forward by Homer Simpson or Max Power.
Yeah. Right.
or,
Right. Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah. Barack Obama.
I would have gone for Max Power.
Yeah. I was going to have Barack Obama write the forward, but he couldn't get it done in time. So
Yeah. So I got one of his kids.
that's right. That's right. That's
Um,
right. Yeah.
the process of publication, did you shop around and find a publisher, or have you self-published?
These are both self-published. I did a decent bit of research and found that for a publisher to do a book like mine, which is 52 full color photos, the economics just don't work. I mean,
No.
I'd have to sell the book for $75 for the publisher to make any money, and for me to make a nickel. And I, I have a day job, and so I self-published these, which has actually been a very interesting and fun process. And I'm not going to get rich off of it, but I enjoy it, and it'll pay for a trip or two, and that's nice. But mostly, it's about getting the work into the hands of people who will appreciate it. I mean, that's it. It really is a giving opportunity, rather than a straight up commercial enterprise. So that's what I do. The book will be available on Amazon the end of October, and will be available on my website at the same time. I do signed copies, on my website, and that's coming very quickly. It's all. I literally just submitted the files for publication yesterday, so it's all hidden behind the scenes right now. The first book is available for sale, but the second book will be coming the end of next month, after I check the proofs and so on. So, but it's underway.
So let's do some shilling. So there we go.
Thank you.
The avianrebby.com. You can get on the email list here, and there is a pretty healthy archive that you've got there, and you've got a store. Let me get that up. So not only the book, but you're also doing prints, and aluminium prints. Tell me about that. When I saw that, I thought, what have you got? What have you got here?
Beautiful.
Let's open that one up.
Yeah. So these aluminum prints, any of the bird photos that I've taken can be printed on this aluminum, and it's done by a company, obviously not by me, but they're absolutely spectacular. I've got them. I have them all over my own home. They're gorgeous. The process that they use of printing these colorful photos on aluminum just makes them absolutely pop. They're extremely vibrant. They're very, very easy to hang. They don't require a frame. So it really is, as I say, I was decorating my home, and I like my own cooking. And so that little broad-tailed hummingbird is hanging in my dining room, and they're gorgeous. I recommend the aluminum prints to people all the time, because they're just magnificent for any kind of photography. Anybody that's listening that's a photographer, if you've got a photo you really like, put it on one of these aluminum prints. They're magnificent.
Yeah, they look good, and I just, while you were talking, walked through the purchase process. So what you do is you find one of the pictures that you like, and then you go and click on purchase, select the size, and then you have to you can't just select the
Yeah,
picture, you have to describe the one you want. So,
right. Just yeah.
so yeah, but certainly it looks good. I'm guessing that you will, once you work out the shipping cost for wherever in the world, you're happy to send them wherever in the world.
I think so. So these actually go from the manufacturer to direct to the person, to the buyer. And
So,
so I think that they do global shipping, but I wouldn't swear to
yeah,
it.
no, but there'd have to be some back and forward to work that out. I'm guessing because
It's worth, if anybody is interested, by all means, drop me a note. You can come to the contact page, drop me a note, and we'll make it happen. We'll figure out. But this is a collection of the birds, and each one, you click on it, and each one has the accompanying text, and it's the record. In a sense, it's the record of the last 2 years of my life. It is a meaningful um, journey that I've taken together with people. And of course, this is the podcast version, um, where folks can listen.
now there's a ripper picture. Let's get that one up. Um,
Yeah.
that's
So
that's the beauty, isn't it?
yeah, so this is a fun one. In fact, I'm going to be teaching at a church next month, and I'm teaching about this photo and how.
Let's point out the different elements in the photo
Yeah.
because it'll be difficult for people to see, I think. But if can you see the cursor moving around there?
Yeah, a little bit.
Now that's the sparrow nest, right?
I think
Because I
so.
reckon I can see two eggs there.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right.
So Sparrow's found himself a nice crevice to build his messy nest in, but the which woodpecker is that? It's
It's a red-bellied.
red-bellied, so it's not
Mhm.
the yellow-bellied sapsucker.
No,
Uh, uh,
no,
and it's just doing what woodpeckers do,
that's right.
probably not having a clue that he's coming up to,
Exactly.
Casa del house sparrow.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating, again, the interactions that you get to see when you're out in the trails, as often as I am, is really special. And these two, for you who knows birds, you see the differences. You know that that's a sparrow and a woodpecker. Some people, they'll look at this photo and you say, well, what do they have something in common, or are they different? And if you were to ask a biologist, what do you see? He's going to say two birds. In other words, these two birds are very distinct from one another from a bird perspective. But if I put those two up on the screen with a snake and a bear and a fish,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
then they're grouped together.
Then they're alike.
Then they're
Exactly.
alike.
Yeah.
And the question of difference versus sameness is a question of perspective. It's not inherent. It's about perspective, and that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to teaching, um, because as I say, I'm teaching Jewish wisdom at a church next month, and it's going to be wonderful. And we're going to look at what are the things that are common, what are the things that are distinct, and many of our, shall we say, disagreements, like you see in this photo, can go away when we realize how much we actually have in common.
The the photo is really cool too. In that, I don't know if you took this just autofocus or whether you had, well, obviously the sparrows in flight. So I'm guessing the camera did all the work for you. But it's fantastic that the really clear focus is on the lichen on this branch on the left. Uh, it, it draws you away from the conflict in a way that makes the conflict more interesting for me, and that the woodpecker head is just ever so slightly out of focus. It's a really great image, and that's one of the things I love about the modern equipment that we have, that you could never have set up for that.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I shoot in manual focus, or manual mode rather, autofocus, but manual mode.
Yeah, in manual mode.
Um,
Yeah,
and and as you say, sometimes the camera suggests some artistic changes that maybe I don't want. And as you say, oftentimes the things that we get inadvertently end up being more meaningful than what we intended. And I think
yeah,
there's a lesson in that as well.
yeah. I think that's a beautiful shot.
Thank you.
Um, and of course, this is one of the podcast episodes,
Right.
so it's really easy to listen to all of the episodes on the website. But you've got it out in pod feeds as well,
Right. It's you can find Avian Rebbe on Apple and Spotify, and I think on Google as well.
and you can generally, if it's in the Apple feed and the Spotify feed, it'll probably get picked up by all the other services that just use the Apple feed anyway. So that's cool. And you can get on the email list just by going to subscribe on your website, and there it is. You can get your weekly dose of avian birdie goodness.
Yeah, there's as you say, from there in the top right corner of the website, if you just click on Free Birdie Goodness in the top right corner,
up here on the button. That's right.
that'll get you signed up for the email list. And that's actually, I think that's probably the richest way to stay in touch. I put the most of me into the emails that I send out on a weekly basis.
Okay, so that's where most of your energy goes to, and not into the podcasting side of it. I mean, look,
That's actually a good point. It's probably, you know what, it probably takes the same. It's probably fairly similar. It's probably fairly similar because of the backstory that I narrate with the podcast. Yeah.
and I reckon sometimes it's harder to do a short podcast because a short podcast for people to remember has to be much
Right.
better than
Yeah.
for an hour-long rambling
Right.
with that I like to do, because it's much harder. It's harder to write a haiku than to write
Right.
an essay.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. No question. No question.
So I tip my hat to you there. I
Well,
think.
thank you.
Now, I'll just because we're coming to the end, I didn't want to give you this news earlier on, but the sad news is that Queen Elizabeth has passed away. It's been announced at 96. So there'll be a lot of reflection by a lot of people over the next couple of days, because
Doubtless.
obviously very significant event for people in the Commonwealth of Nations, but reinforcing the point that life goes on. We can't stop it, can we? It's going to happen to us no matter what.
No, that's right.
With that perspective in mind, what's next for you in your bird focused activities after you get the book out? Because that's obviously going to be taking a lot of your energy, and you got to flog it once you've printed it. You've got to get it sold.
Right. You know, for decades, going back to high school, I have enjoyed public speaking, and I am focused quite a bit on taking the opportunity to learn together with people in person. I am spending uh, quite a few weeks uh, in in churches, in synagogues. Through the end of the year, I've just recently spoken to a couple of business organizations, and I think in the next year, my focus is really going to be on finding opportunities that we can learn together in person, because I think there's a different dynamic when these conversations are interactive. So, today's podcast or today's conversation and its interactivity is really a joy for me, and that's the kind of thing that I'd like to be able to offer to people and to new communities. And so that's something that I'm going to be reaching out to move a little bit. Um, Directionally, thematically, I'm exploring some new areas as well. By background, I'm a business guy. I have a master's in business administration, and I've spent my entire career working in business. And so one of the areas that I want to explore is how can these lessons of birds and of spiritual wisdom be applied to business? And so there are some things that I'm starting to write in that context. And consequently, I want to find some new audiences um, to look into those new areas. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. So there's no shortage of new things to explore in the year to come.
That gives us a whole nother thread to pull. Not only am I a horticulturist, I'm also an accountant. So,
Okay, yeah,
but an accountant who doesn't like accounting very much. But
right,
I
right,
do
right.
like, but I do like analysing business and systems. But
Yeah.
so let me ask you something that I've put to a couple of people recently, because I interviewed somebody who has um, uh, an analytical uh, process to benchmark your business in a green to make it green. And I'm next week um, next week speaking to a advisor, funds manager,
Hmm.
who is part of one of the largest institutions in Australia about sustainable
Mm.
investing.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope you're aware of a company that I keep my eye on in the States called Aspiration. Um, you should check out aspiration.com.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
The folks who plant trees.
yeah, well, who and also invest in sustainable activities, and for
Okay.
years have been promoting uh, sustainable investing, but
Okay.
also now with their transaction card,
Right.
you know,
Right.
you round up and it
Yeah, yeah,
goes
yeah.
to tree
Okay.
planting and whatnot. So we don't sort of have an equivalent here yet. Um, but I wonder, with your business hat on, your business guy
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
sustainability and biodiversity, how how important is that, are you finding, in decision making now in business? Like, and I'll preface it, everybody is talking the talk, but I don't see many people walking the walk.
Yeah, I don't know. As you say, it is certainly something that people talk about. Climate risk, particularly, is now considered to be one of the disclosure items that businesses have to address in their regulatory filings, their annual report. Are they susceptible to it? Are they causing it? Because both of those imply risk, right? Um, and it's definitely on people's minds, and and we're finishing up our summer, and the summer where I live has been plagued by drought, and in other areas by floods, and in California by blackouts.
Yeah, I
Uh,
was just going to make that
yeah,
example today. I mean, for a
yeah,
couple of days in a row,
right,
I consume some shows out of California,
yeah,
and they're not able to do the work out of the
Right.
studios because they're blacked
Right.
out. So everyone's back doing the shows by
Yeah.
Zoom or StreamYard
Right.
from their caves at home
Right.
if they haven't been
Right.
blacked out.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Third,
that's
first world problem, third world conditions, right?
it's very real. I mean,
Yeah.
we can argue forever about what causes it and what to do about it and so on, but you can't really, I mean, I was at the lake the other day taking pictures, and there was a bollard that says no boats, and it's supposed to be in the shallow water to show that the boats,
Yeah.
shouldn't come here in the
What is
shallow
it?
water.
Halfway up the playing field now.
It's way the hell out in the middle of a field.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no boat for 100 yards near this bollard. And, again, you don't have to be a climate scientist to see that, there used to be water over there. And now we're going to have years of sustained rain.
Oh.
I mean, like Noah and the Ark kind of rain.
Yeah.
Get the lakes back full.
That's right. Let me extend this point a little bit more and actually I want to ask, do you do business advice? Like, are you,
well, professionally, I work for an inventor who has a large patent portfolio,
okay.
and we license those patents.
Okay.
And
So,
so that's
so you're the stereotypical sort of Seinfeld Jewish joke, the patent attorney kind of thing, right?
I'm not an attorney, but otherwise, yes.
But you know where I'm going. You know where I'm going with that,
Yeah.
right? What I am worried about when we talk about sustainability and biodiversity, and I talk about how everyone's sort of talking about it, now it's become really easy to turn the conversation to climate change, and people want to talk about how they're being, carbon neutral or whatever.
Yeah.
And to me, even though that's a pressing issue, that's almost yesterday's problem because everyone's sort of says, yeah, we've got to do something about it. How slowly they move towards doing something about it is a different issue. Where I'm really concerned is the biodiversity and sustainability issue. So I worry that people think they're doing the right thing because they're cutting down on their carbon or their power consumption or whatever. But I'm interested in the builder, right? The contractor who actually thinks about where his timber comes from.
Right.
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 And how it's produced. I'm interested in people sort of deciding whether or not they are in purchasing from companies that are continuing to clear land rather than buy already cleared and degraded land and use that,
Right.
And that's my fear is that where it's becoming a new greenwashing and sort of astroturfing field for people to go, oh yes, we're carbon neutral. Yeah, but to make your chocolate, you're still knocking down jungles,
Right.
to plant other plantations, and that's my big concern. So we're on different ends of the world. How and you guys are riven by a sort of political divide that seems insane to people who are watching it from another part of the world where we're pretty tribal and things can get pretty feisty, but we're not calling the other side of politics Satanists or I saw some insane rant by Trump just the other day at one of his rallies, and I'm thinking, God, 45% of the country reckon this guy's okay.
Yeah.
So my concern is because we all have to move en masse to do things differently.
Right.
How? And of course we haven't got any empirical evidence or anything here. So I'm just asking for your gut feeling. And you're in Texas, the Lone Star shoot 'em up state, right?
Yep.
And and who wants to drink milk if you can drink oil, right? Um, so, I mean, of course, I'm being facetious, but Texas is one of the places that from here we would think is going to be less likely to be, treading lightly and saving the planet. From your gut feeling, how ready is the US to actually do something? Because the climate bill was pretty shit, really.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yeah. Sorry, the Inflation
Right.
Reduction
Yeah.
Kiss Joe Manchin's bum bill. Yeah.
It is complex. I mean, ironically, in defense of my home, Texas creates more wind energy than any other state in America.
Yeah.
And
so,
and produces more oil.
So why
Yeah.
is only one trumpeted? Like, that's what
Well, it
puzzles
depends
me.
on who you talk to. Depends on who you talk to, and a lot of it has to do with looking to score points. If you're coming from the left and you want to knock Texas, you talk about our oil production. If you're coming from the right and you want to knock Texas, you talk about our wind power. And you're right. One of the things that's interesting here is that we have a binary political system, as opposed to a parliamentary system where maybe some and I know that some of the bigger parliamentary systems effectively have only 2 or 3 parties, but we only have 2 to speak of. We have wings within them, and so it makes it tough. You only get one choice or the other into which bucket you're going to vote. So, I may like something about the Republicans, but I dislike something,
Yeah.
and now I have to still weigh within the Republicans, or
That's
the
right.
same.
You've still got a binary. You've still got a binary choice. There's
I
only
don't
2
have
doors.
a choice of,
Yeah.
I'm not a social democrat, so I'm going to vote green, or
Yeah.
I don't like the moderate right wing party. I'm going to go for the extreme right wing party. We don't have that full spectrum like European parties or European systems.
Or here, where we have our left wing party now, which has holds government through the lower chamber, the lower house, but they can't get legislation passed through both houses without dealing with independents and the Greens, which, from my point of view, is fantastic, because you don't get one side completely buggering it up, because wisdom never resides just in one set of people sitting around a table.
So it's tricky. I mean, we I think right now, particularly in the last few months, as a consequence of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and coupled with the disruption of global supply chains, when you talk about building materials, you just had another kid and you want to add a room onto your house, and the guy says it's 6 months before I can get lumber. I don't care where the lumber came from. I just need to get my kid out of my crying wife's room and get the room built.
But isn't that the problem that we've built for ourselves? And I
Absolutely.
mean, this isn't an American problem.
No. By no means.
We've sort of lost the ability to go, hey, my great grandparents couldn't just put on another room. People had the cot in their
Yeah.
And I for one, I'm just thinking, only once, and I'm over 50, only once in my life have I lived in a house with more than one bathroom and one toilet, right? And I've never felt deprived from that. And actually, I did live in a place where we had a second toilet, and it was 35 yards or meters out the back door. And if you had to go there in winter, you froze your feet off, right? We've created a society where we've become really soft and really entitled, and are buggering up the world without any idea how the rest of the world live. It's
There is no question. I mean, I saw where the UK is going to cap energy prices because the fear was that thousands and thousands of people were going to die of cold
Hmm.
this winter.
Well, it
And
it it's been happening for years in England. It just hasn't been a news item. That not maybe not thousands, but certainly hundreds of
I
people
mean, the thought
in
was,
England die.
from what I
Yeah.
heard, that the idea was that there were going to be thousands of people freezing to death,
Mm, mm, mm.
and you know, uh, I am fully aware, fully cognizant, and fully in favor of transitioning to new energy sources. Um, I'm also not sure that this is the month to do it.
No,
Um,
it
you know, we
not.
we've got to be doing both. We've got to be building out for the next generation, as well as making sure that in the meantime, people are being able to get grain out of Ukraine so they can eat,
Yeah.
because otherwise East Africa is going to be a horror. And
Well,
we've got to have energy so that people are able to keep the lights on, and simple things like refrigeration that we take for granted is a real luxury in some places.
well,
It's not about being able to have the downtown skylight lit up. It's about being able to have a single bulb so I can read a book while I'm in school, or keep my medications in the fridge cool. Energy matters, and I think that we've got to be looking at more resilient and longer term strategies for energy.
mm.
Um, you know,
and
and
and it's not a
doing
binary choice, right?
no, it's got to be
That
sequenced.
that
I
that,
mean,
that, that
that's the thing. I mean,
that's it.
you can't do these things out of sequence. Even in the States, everybody's pushing for electric cars at the same time that California is telling people, they just banned gas powered vehicles
Yeah,
for sale in 2035, and today they're telling people turn your lights off.
yeah. But
So
that,
what,
but
you got to build
but
out the you got
yeah,
to build out the infrastructure.
but one isn't to blame for the other.
No,
The
no,
the
no, no,
the
no,
the
no. But
the,
what I'm
the,
saying
the,
is they
the
need to
fact
happen
is that we're 30
simultaneously.
years behind on developing the solution,
Agreed.
and what and another thing I'm worried about. I'm really interested in your perspective on this too. Is that I mean, most of us who think about these issues have probably already determined that oil production has reached its the top of its life cycle in when we talk about economic cycles, and it's over mature, right? It's on the downward side, but we've got a moral and ethical sort of responsibility, I think, to not be trying to find new markets in developing countries and saying, hey, let's speed up your development by giving you cheap oil.
Yeah.
What we should be doing is saying, here's a much better way to power your modern life, and
Right.
helping them do that. But I don't even see that being evident, which really um, really
Yeah.
surprises me. And food production is another one. When we talk about sustainable, why are we
Huge.
continuing to push food sustainability and security, and always thinking about crops which are probably going to be unsustainable over a huge part of the area that they're currently grown, as climate changes and water becomes
Yeah.
less available. So I don't see government level discussions about moving to change what we eat and how we eat,
Yeah.
because we're going to have to do that, or else, you know, you said East Africa. There's a war going on there. Does anyone even know about it?
Nope.
Has anyone been talking about Ethiopia? You know,
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Very, very little of American media. BBC does. Very little of American media. Yeah. No, I
so
mean,
are you,
these are yeah. You're raising good questions. No, I mean, there's no doubt that that these are the kinds of issues that need to be addressed. They need to be addressed in a sequenced fashion that takes into account where we have to be in some, medium to longer term, and faces the constraint that if everybody dies this winter, nothing that we worry about for 2 years from now is going to make a difference.
Yeah,
That's the
no,
hard part.
that's true. And look, there's a whole lot of thorny issues too. There's the whole thing about degrowth. There's the size of the world's population. There's a whole lot
Yeah.
of ethical questions that
Yeah.
are really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole first world perspective, about
Right.
I don't want you people, you brown people, doing this, which it's sometimes you can't help but fall into it, because we're all trapped in our own heads and our own backyards and our own suburbs.
For sure.
But what we do influences everybody else. And, look at my backdrop.
Yeah.
We're continuing to bugger up this poor little fella. And most people in Australia haven't got a clue that this amazing bird even exists, right?
Well, that's it. I mean, it's a perfect example. I mean, um, let's say for the sake of argument that it's a park behind you, where that bird lives, and you and I enjoy going to that park, and we feel good about the experience that we have, and here in my town of Austin, where we're dealing with a housing crisis, and housing is unaffordable for a huge number of people. Every acre that's set aside for parks is one less acre that's set aside for housing.
Mm.
And balancing those is tricky. It's tricky. I
So
know what my preference is,
and
and I know that I'm not the only one that has this preference.
But I'll put my pinko lefty hat on, and I would say, okay, in a built-up area, we have to better utilise the land that has already been resumed, and maybe you don't want high density housing, but maybe medium density housing needs to be talked about. But then everyone says, I really support that, but not in my street.
Over there.
Yeah. But I don't think that this suburb really lends itself to that kind of development. Of course, that's not unique to anywhere in the world. But hey, we're going to have to, forgive my, we're going to have to eat a shit sandwich that isn't as bad as the dog shit sandwich, right?
Yeah, the first caveman argued about that.
Yeah, and it's but at least if you're going to be a grumpy old man, we can be grumpy. We can be grumpy about a bigger issue than just get off my lawn.
Right. Yep.
All right, let's just lighten the mood for a minute. I want to ask you, what's been your most significant experience with birds? Can you lock one down?
I think at the end of last year, I went out to the western deserts of Texas, and I hadn't been out there since I was a kid. I didn't have any memory of it, and I think the overpowering sense of space and emptiness really was palpable. I was actually taken aback at how impacted I was emotionally at just seeing, this endless amount of space. And occasionally I would see a bird in it. And I wrote a piece about a raven that I saw, and how I was so grateful for that raven because it gave me something almost tangible to hold on to. In other words, I could lock my focus on seeing that. In the midst of all this emptiness, there was a presence there, and it really, maybe the emotional impact was as much geography and place as it was the bird per se, but it was the juxtaposition between the two that affected me so strongly. And it's been powerful in the way that you want to go see a different bird, you go to a different place, and seeing those different places in those different ways, I think is really really valuable perspective.
Well, you're good at leading me to where I want to go. That's brilliant. So, are you a lister? Are you maintaining a
No,
list now? Okay.
no, no,
But,
I am not. That's not uh, that's not what drives me. I
yeah.
love seeing a new bird, and there have been times that I wanted to see a particular bird because I thought it was beautiful, or I had no idea it even existed, or something like that, and I'll go look for it, but not necessarily because I want to say that I have 137 birds on my list from this county, or from this state, or this country, something
Mm,
like that.
mm,
No,
mm.
no.
No, we're fellow travellers there. I don't maintain a list. I've got no idea what my number is.
Yeah,
I've never ever gone through and done a tally. But I do go through my bird books and go, yep,
yeah,
yep,
yeah,
yep, yep,
yeah.
and that leads me to my next question: is there a bird that you sort of have on your radar that you really do want to see?
I'd really like to see a peregrine falcon.
You
Um,
haven't seen one.
I've never seen one.
Wow.
They're
Oh,
around.
yeah.
It's not unheard of to see one here, but I really would like to see one. Um,
Whenever
and
it's silent here, which isn't very often, whenever it's silent, I look up
right, right,
and
right, right, right.
and we have both the Australian hobby or little falcon and peregrines that do traverse this area. I wouldn't say they're residents, but I do see
Mhm.
them. But I have two neighbours who have flocks of racing pigeons,
Okay,
homing
yeah,
pigeons. So I think that's an attraction
right,
for them.
right, right.
But I'm surprised because peregrines don't hide.
No, and I think if I made an effort to go find one,
You probably
I
could.
probably could.
Yeah. Just
But
look up whenever it's quiet. Just look up.
yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
I typically I describe what I do as an interrupted walk. I go on a walk, and if I see a bird, or more likely I hear a bird, I'll stop and receive some photos. But it's rare. I don't spend any time in a blind or a hide,
Mm-hmm.
and I rarely go looking for a specific bird in a specific place. That's unusual for me.
Have you got a favourite haunt, a favourite location, or are you looking for new experiences with the camera and that will draw
Yeah.
draw birds in?
So I used to go almost every day to the same park, and I've stopped largely because there are eh, when I go walking around wearing a hat, carrying my binoculars, carrying a camera. Apparently, dogs don't recognize me as a person. They can be upset by seeing this variant, and it's not a big deal when people keep their dog on a leash. I've had some experiences where people don't keep their dog on a leash,
Hmm.
and their inconsiderate approach has kept me from going back to this park very often, which is really too bad. And I usually end up being considered the bad guy because the dog comes running at me, barking and growling. And I like dogs. I really do. I don't like people who carry a leash because they want to keep their dog safe in the parking lot, and then let their dog off the leash,
Yeah,
despite the fact that it might endanger other people. That bothers me.
yeah, and
So,
I'm sure you guys have got off leash parks
oh, we have, yeah, we
yeah,
have rules. It's just
but
that
yeah,
people don't
people
bother to follow
yeah.
them, and they're not enforced. So that's a bit of an issue. But
First Amendment and Second Amendment.
No, it's
Thou
just
shalt let the dog off the lead.
no,
No,
it's just about being
I know.
inconsiderate.
I'm just
Yeah,
being.
sadly, I know.
I'm just being
Um,
nasty.
so, but I'm making an effort now. In fact, the second book is about it's called Stretches His Wings. It's about travel for the first time and how after the COVID lockdowns, um, you know, if if the first year or the first year of COVID and the first book were about being constrained in this area, um, I didn't take any trips. The second book, the second year, is about, well, okay, I'll drive someplace, and I will stay in a hotel, and so that's kind of coming out of the nest a little bit, stretching his wings. So it's now time to travel more. I was just in Iberia a few weeks ago. I'm headed to California. I'm headed to Colorado. And so I'm going and I'm bringing my camera to see what I see, and so we'll see. Yeah, yeah. It's about exploration. I mean, and that's one of the things that I like so much about birds. You go to 7 continents, you can find birds. They're everywhere. New ones, um, interesting ones. There's something to learn everywhere we go.
So there'll be a third book.
I'm hoping there's going to be a whole series of books. You know, Bleenetter, as we say. Um,
I'm I just sort of maybe the final avenue of exploration is um, how hard. It's probably not really the right word, but was it a difficult process to get a book out of yourself? Like like when
mm,
like did I'm sure you've heard people say everyone's got at least one book inside
right,
them,
right,
right?
right.
I sometimes feel like that, but I worked in publishing for a while, and I know what a bloody arduous task it is to produce a book. And I always think, oh, it's easier to turn the microphone on and do a podcast.
Right, right,
It
right,
really
right.
is.
Yeah. Um, so if I were to sit down and just say I want to write a book, I think the answer to your question would be yeah, it's hard. Um, my books are compilations of the work that I do through the course of the year.
Hmm.
So I publish two pieces each week, Monday and Thursday. Um, in Jewish tradition, Torah teaching, the reading of our history, is done on Mondays and Thursdays and Saturdays. The premise being that Torah is analogized to water, and just like if we go for more than 3 days without water, we die. If we go for more than 3 days without Torah, we spiritually die. So I publish every Monday and Thursday, and these are offerings, these are gifts that I make, and so I don't do it from the standpoint of I want to write a book. I do it from the standpoint of here are the things that I want to give, and at the end of the year I compile it into a book and package it in that way. So in that sense, it's a lot of work, and there is a constant feeling of I have something to give next week and next week and next week and next week. Um, but it's become part of my routine of my day and of my week, and I feel good about the giving. I'll put it that way. These are offerings.
I think that's a really nice point to finish up on. I just put that up again so that people can easily see Avian Rebbe. So that's how to spell it. It's up
Thank
there
you.
on
Yeah, right,
.com.
right.
Will take you to Eric's site. I I endorse his approach, even though we're not sharing the same spirituality and organized religious path. I think the threads are universal. That's certainly what drew me towards having the conversation. I think we can all love nature, and by loving nature, we can all be better to ourselves and better to the people around us, and hopefully through that, better to the world, because we need it. Don't you reckon?
Absolutely. That's a beautiful closing thought, and exactly what I would hope that we would be able to share. That's lovely. Thank you, and
Well,
certainly thank you for the opportunity to be here, and at this hour, no less. So I really have enjoyed our conversation
well,
very much.
each morning when I go out for a walk, I just take note of my hashtag first seen and heard,
Yes.
and as it ticked 4:50 here AM, my resident blackbird has begun singing.
Nice.
So I have my first heard for the morning, European blackbird, and I don't know what's going to be the first scene. Eric, there's something you can do if you want to join in on the Twitter, hashtag first seen and heard. When
Good.
you get out, and just
Excellent.
it's just to give people an idea of what is around in
That's
people
great.
different neighbourhoods around the world.
Good.
I must nag my friend, my fellow podcast guest, Jared Hitchings. Have you come across Jared's prothonotary warbler musings and work? I mean,
No, but I'd like to. I love that bird.
Well, I will tag him on
Beautiful.
on the next Twitter
Please.
that I do, acknowledging
Good.
the conversation.
Good.
Illinois warblers. I think it's just IL
Okay.
warblers, but we'll get that up. Yeah, Jared's a massive prothonotary warbler nerd.
Nice.
And gets his kids making nest boxes out of the Tetra Pak milk cartons.
Yeah.
So,
how cool.
Yeah. And what a cool bird prothonotary warbler is. Right?
Yeah, it's a
great
gorgeous
name.
bird.
Cool
Yeah.
bird.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Wonderful.
Thanks for being with us, Eric. Thanks for being with
you.
us, viewers. It's been, nobody's had anything to say. No one's prodding me with extra questions, so I must have covered all the requisite ground. I will plug thebirdemergency.com and, of course, hashtag first seen and heard. I'm trying to do it now. YouTube Shorts, Instagram, Twitter, and I'm trying to learn TikTok. I can't get... but yeah, spread the words, the
Good.
birdie love, and I might even order one of your books. I think, Eric, I'm interested. Although I like reading stuff online. So are you putting it out as an ebook?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
Amazon has it on the Kindle.
Cool. So I can
Beautiful.
I can get it as a Kindle. Magnificent.
Wonderful.
Thanks
All
very
right.
much. Bye,
Thank
bird
you.
nerds.
A joy.
Good morning, and R.I.P. Queen Elizabeth. Thanks for giving us your Queen's birthday holiday every year. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate.
All right. Thanks again. Bye-bye.